I was invited to a friend's wedding in BC, so I booked a flight and made plans to be there. After getting my work schedule and seeing that I had 15 days off instead of just the 7 I had booked, I figured it was a good idea to cancel my flight and turn this into a road trip. Was it a good idea though? Well, let's say it was an adventure. Well, let's go. I made a plan to camp in my car most of the way to save some money. On my previous road trip, accommodations were my biggest expense, so I wanted to be smarter about this one. I watched a ton of videos on how to car camp and went out and got a bunch of stuff to make the experience go smoother. I would not describe myself as a camper, but after getting so much good advice from others who do this full time, I felt increasingly excited about this new kind of adventure. I set up the air mattress bed in the back seat, packed up the trunk, and I was all set to go. I set off on day 1 with such high hopes for this trip. I left work at 2 p.m., eager and happy, and picked up a coffee and began my first leg of this trip towards Sudbury. Even the brief period of rain couldn't dampen my spirits. The scenery driving through Ontario is stunning, and I wasn't even at the best part yet. Because I worked 6 to 2 that day and then drove the 6+ hours, I decided the best decision for my first night was to spend it in a hotel. Get a good night's sleep before the next few long driving days. I didn't get a lot of sleep the first night, but I still woke up, got on the road early, and was excited for the day ahead. I just couldn't leave Sudbury without making a stop at the Big Nickel, so I headed over before beginning my drive to day 2's destination. I had visited the Nickel with my family on our first road trip across Canada that we did back in 1990. But because there had been so many years in between these trips, I had little actual memory of any of the stops other than the pictures I had to remind me of them. This is why I think that it is so important to take time to capture special moments so to be able to remember where I've been and how it's impacted my life. Each trip is a journey that leads me to explore more of who I am and where God is leading me. Due to an issue with my fuel pump that I just couldn't get fully fixed before I left, I had to make a lot more stops for gas. This sounds like it would be annoying, but I had so many roadside attractions I wanted to stop at anyways, so it wasn't much of an inconvenience at this point. Plus, it was good to get out and stretch quite often. But more to come on that issue later. My next roadside stop in Echo Bay increased my fortune from a big nickel to a big loonie. I then stopped in Wawa to see the big goose. Wawa means wild goose or land of big goose in Ojibwe. Since I was driving by, I also stopped in White River to visit the birthplace of Winnie the Pooh. It was here that Lieutenant Harry Colburn adopted an orphan black bear and named it after his hometown of Winnipeg. This bear, Winnie, became the unofficial mascot of his militia cavalry regiment in England during World War I. Winnie slept under Harry's cot until Coleman learned he was being transferred to France. He settled Winnie in the London Zoo as he could not take her with him, and she fast became a fan favorite. And it was here that Christopher Robin Milne visited her with his father, A.A. Milne, the author of the beloved children's book, Winnie the Pooh. Before I arrived at my camping spot for the night, I just had to stop at one of the many viewpoints along the way to admire the great views of Lake Superior. I could have stopped so often as the scenery was beyond spectacular, but I wouldn't have made it very far and never would make it all the way to BC in time if I stopped everywhere I wanted to. Hopefully one day I can take this trip again at a much slower pace. My good mood from the day, though, fled as I got to my campsite at Rainbow Falls Provincial Park. I had some issues settling in, as I had not really prepared as much as I should have, and turns out sleeping in your car can be a little more complicated than I thought it would be. I made myself some dinner with my electric frying pan and kettle, as I was trying to keep things very simple. My attitude was not good, though, which made the process not so much fun. This was due to an issue I had with the campsite itself. So I lost my sight tonight because someone had it booked for tomorrow and had the site I'm on booked for tonight. But instead of switching sites tomorrow, he decided to just set up on my site accidentally. And this is the view I was supposed to have right here. But instead I'm up by the highway, so it's going to be a noisy night. But at least I still come down here and enjoy this. And yeah, maybe I should have made a fuss, but I don't really always like to do. Oh, yeah, I kind of do, but I didn't tonight, and I should have. But it's okay, because I know how you stay upset when this is right here. Yeah, so I went down, played by the water. All my grumpies left because, I mean, that view, really, you just saw it, amazing, right? So now I'm cozy in my car, and it's actually pretty good. I have quite a bit of room, so chilling out here. It's really kind of hard to see everything because I do have all the windows blacked out in the front. I have mosquito netting on the front windows so that I can keep them open a little bit and get some airflow. My little fan that is keeping me cool and drowning out some of the outside noise because I am up by the highway instead of down by the water. But yeah, my little light, I'm journaling, and just it's space, but it's going to be a little cramped once I do lay down. But we'll see how good of a night I have tonight, and hopefully I don't hate this as much as I did when I first got here. But yeah, back on the road tomorrow. Surprisingly, I slept well, and it was actually pretty quiet. I woke up early, packed up my site. Packing up is so much faster than setting up. And today I would finally make it out of Ontario. It is very true that half the battle of driving west is getting through Ontario. The northern part of Ontario is very beautiful though, and I had plans to explore more of it on the way home when I thought I'd have more time. The time by the water the night before was helpful to improve my mood, and my first stop of the day brought me back into that exciting mood. I had seen We Met Provincial Park on another vlogger's videos about driving west, Tia and Andy, and was very intrigued by it. It was a quick and easy hike and so worth the stop. I also kind of really need this like outdoor nature time because so far it's been kind of rushed and I've felt a little like anxious on the road so far. So this is going to help me relax and breathe because this is kind of the thing that's been doing that. So that's why I've decided to make sure I do this right now. And already, yeah, this is what I needed. Help me get back in the zone so I can get the last couple of really long driving days into BC. And do them well and not be anxious and not be rushed. And yeah, I need this to calm me down. So I just passed the only other two people who were in the parking lot because there's only one car. And so now I'm here by myself. Having time in nature always heals my mood, and I was once again ready to tackle the rest of the drive to Winnipeg. I had to make a stop at the Terry Fox Memorial while driving through Thunder Bay. The statue stands to mark the place where Terry Fox was forced to stop his east to west cross-Canada run to raise money and awareness for cancer research on August 31st, 1980. I then stopped to visit Max the Moose in Dryden. He may not be the biggest moose in Canada, but he is the oldest. Representing Dryden since 1962, he stands in honor of his ancestors and friends of the wilderness. There's not much info on his bald eagle friend, though. Before finally exiting Ontario, I made one more stop in Kenora to visit Husky the Muskie. Kenora could not let themselves be outdone by a goose, so their chambers of commerce decided to erect a large muskie, or the cane of sportfish, to entice those driving cross-country to stop in their town. Well, it worked on me, and if I had more time, I would have liked to explore this happening town even more. Maybe on the way back. I crossed over into Manitoba shortly after, and before I made it to my final destination for the day, I had to make one more stop at the Centre of Canada Park. This was particularly significant to me this year, as I was driving to the west coast on this trip, and in another few weeks I would be driving with my family to the east coast. I'll not quite make it tip to tip, but this is the halfway mark of those two journeys, which I found quite interesting and significant. To get back on the highway, I noticed that next door there was an interesting field full of vintage tractors, so I drove over to check it out. Pete's Centre of Canada Heritage Museum is by donation and there to share the history of farming in Canada. As someone from farm country, I had to take a walk around and check it out. At this point, I was tired from a long day of driving, but my mood was still quite high. But that would soon change. The discount hotel I had originally booked was being overrun by a very boisterous party and set off a really kind of sketchy vibe. So after seeing my room and walking by some of the partygoers and the way they were treating the hotel, I quickly went back down to the desk and asked for a refund. I just did not feel safe or comfortable there and wasn't going to stay. I was able to find a new accommodations at the Radisson, which should have been a huge upgrade, but wasn't as much, more only a slight upgrade. But at least it was safer and it was good enough to get some sleep in. The view of the city did not compete with the waves of Lake Superior I had the previous night, but I was still able to relax a bit, rest up, and I woke up still a bit irritated and a little leery of the very long day I had before me. I had taken too much time to get out of Ontario, so I was going to have to do 2 very long driving days to make it to BC in time for the wedding. Today, I had to boot it from Winnipeg, Manitoba to Lethbridge, Alberta, over 1,200 kilometers. I started with another stop at a couple of big things. First, the world's largest Coca-Cola can in Portage La Prairie, and then Sarah the Camel in Glenborough. Sarah was erected to draw attention to the community and the Spirit Sands and Spruce Woods Provincial Park close by. So I just read Sarah the Camel arrived October 11th, 1978, which is a year exactly before I was born. So she's 1 year older than me. That's so interesting. I mostly drove straight through Saskatchewan. Most people, when talking about their drive out west, they mention how boring and flat the prairies are. I do agree they are pretty flat, but boring? No way. They may not be the obvious beauty of the mountains, but the glowing yellow and green of the canola fields contrasted with the bright cloud-filled blue sky kept me saying wow the whole way through. Summer is definitely the time you want to make this drive. It was with this backdrop that the things I had been avoiding started to work their way to the surface. During these long drive days, I had a lot of good crying and prayer sessions where I just really laid it all out, my frustrations, the pain, the questions that I've been stuffing down in order to just keep going, as there never seemed to be time to work through it all. Podcasts were enough to distract me for most of the afternoon, but it seemed that I needed to start my day every day with working on my healing process. I did make one stop in Canada's most notorious city, Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. Here I visited the world's largest moose, Mac. He was erected in 1984 to bring tourists to Moose Jaw. I also went into the visitor center where I learned more about the intriguing things that Moose Jaw had to offer. I so wish I had more time to stay here, as this city has such an interesting history worth exploring. Maybe on the way back I'll have more time. There were more I had on my list to visit, but I just didn't have the time to do it all. There seems to be quite a few large roadside attractions along the Trans-Canada to stop at on your long drive out west. I made it into Lethbridge just before the sun went down. The first interesting observation I made as I crossed the border into Alberta was that there was a massive increase in the amount of pickup trucks on the road. The reason I made Lethbridge my stop for today was that my cousin lives here, and she so graciously offered her spare room to me for the night, and I'm truly grateful for the clean, comfy, safe, and, well, free bed. My stay at Morgan's was a quick one. I went to bed shortly after arriving, woke up early, and left right away. My final day of driving would be the longest yet, as I had to make it from Lethbridge, Alberta to Langley, BC before the end of the day. The 15-hour driving day made longer by extra gas stops I had to make along the way. I should have gotten the issue fixed before I left, but I just didn't have the time. It did make for a much more interesting road trip though. Didn't make any stops this time other than just gas and food. The drive got much more interesting though, as I started weaving my way through BC's Okanagan region and the mountains. I also started today, again, with another session of working through things and the tears that I just could not hold in. As much as being alone all the time can be hard, it did make it easier to let the tears flow. It was a very scenic drive, but by the end of the day, I was exhausted and depleted from driving around and around the mountains. I felt like I was doing circles the whole way and often wondered if Google Maps was playing with me. I arrived at my mom's cousins, Sharon and Chris's house that night. It was late, but I made it. Again, very grateful for the family who opened up their home for me for my whole time in BC. After 4.5 long days, I was so appreciative of the comfy and spacious RV that I would call home for the next 5 days. The drive out west was a rushed one, but I knew that going into this. It was also met with many challenging moments and long drives, which gave me plenty of time and opportunity to work through many of the hurts, frustrations, and questions I have been struggling with for a couple of years now. The healing process is a tough one, and these long, lonely days on the road are the fun environment for continuing on this journey. Surely, the rest of this trip would be more restful and free of trials and difficulties, right? Well, stay tuned for the next video to find out how the rest of the trip went.